How can the politics, the economics, the education of the colonialists be wrong, and yet their religion remains right? Then we need to start thinking. And what are we missing here? Everything that is here has been evil. How can you find something that is righteous in such a rotten environment? It's not just about destroying the system. It's also about creating parallel systems that begin to address our African problems, so that the young politicians, the young minds, the young socialists, the young revolutionaries, be it in Burkina Faso, be it in Kenya, be it in Zimbabwe, be it in Namibia, be it in Somalia, be it in Nigeria, it does not matter where you are. As young people and as young politicians, as young revolutionaries, you need to put your mind around the system. Understand the mind and the intention of the trader. Understand the mind and the intention of the explorer. Understand the mind and the intention of the missionary. Understand the mind and the intention of the mercenary. When you understand these four people, you are able to walk up to your government and see in what way are they acting like the traders, and what kind of deals are they now making in the 21st century, which still favors the explorers, which kind of policies are still in place which favor the traders, which policies are still entrenched which favors the missionary, which policies are in place which favors the mercenary. So that when you have a revolution as Africans, you need to change the narrative of the trader. You need to change the business of the trader. You need to change the narrative of the explorer. You need to change the thinking of your own people. You need to change and consider the narrative of the missionary. And you need to change the indoctrination by the missionaries. Ultimately, you need to look very carefully at the agenda of the mercenaries. You need to change the agenda and the policies of the mercenaries. And you cannot tell me that the religion is right, but the politics is wrong. The economics is wrong. The business is wrong. Education is wrong. Halala Jesus. Halala Jesus. But Jesus is right. I think I've been with you long enough. By now you can tell where I'm going. By now you can tell where I'm going. That this bag is full of rotten things. I don't even want to start talking about a black Jesus or a colored Jesus or a Chinese Jesus. What the whole ideology around human flesh consumption, whole ideology around the dogma of religious practice as taught by Christianity, it is not African, it is not biblical, it is a totally different cooked up theology that does not find its basis in our own African ethnic spaces. We have never, and we will never be given rotten food and we must be told to eat it because it's a white man who cooked it. We don't. I will not personally. I will not. So understanding the agenda of the system in the hands of the trader, the merchants, in the hands of the explorers, the educators, in the hands of the missionaries, the pastors, bishops, the popes, the prophets, papas. What is their mission and what is their agenda? So that everyone should kneel before Jesus. Every knee shall bow. Every tongue must confess that Jesus is Lord. Yeah, wow. Interesting. And what are we when we get there? We all with servants, sinners, kneeling at the feet of Jesus at the cross so that we can all be saved. Wow. And then what? Jesus is Lord. And then what? Then we are sons and daughters of God. Then what? Then he will take us to heaven. And then what? Bring us back here after 1,000 years. And then what? Then continue to live as human beings. And then what? And then live forever. Like, really? So even in heaven, a human being will remain as a human being. And God will remain as God. So why even bother to go to heaven when you are already what you are and God will remain what he is? I wonder if someone is understanding what I'm saying. Let me say that slowly. In the religious dictum or the hierarchy of religious persuasion, where there is a God, then underneath God there's a devil, under the devil then there are angels, under angels then there are prophets and pastors and kings and normal human beings. So when you get to heaven, God will remain God. A human being will remain a human being. Though he is, according to the teachings of scriptures, which I'm still struggling with, though he gets there and he looks like God, he's going to live eternally. But when you read the scriptures correctly, it says we still will be worshiping God. So God remains God. And you remain you, but in a better state. But you still remain you. And you'll come back to this earth again and live forever. We're already there on this earth, living. So what's the infatuation and the obsession of going to heaven only to remain as a human being, and God remains as God and the devil remains as the devil? What is the agenda of Islam? Is that where everybody must bow down to Allah, inshallah, inshallah, Allah Akbar, Allah Akbar, Allah, inshallah, inshallah, and all? What do we want to do? We want to see the whole world. Whole world. That's the agenda of Saudi Arabia, the agenda of the Islamic countries. We want to see the whole world. Must throw away this Bible and throw away this Jesus. Everyone must become Muslim. All bring them to Allah by fire, by force, by sword, by war, by love, anything, by any means possible. Indoctrinate the world over until everybody is Muslim. And we have mosques everywhere around the world. And Saudi Arabia will be collecting taxes from all the countries and building up a bigger shrine in Saudi Arabia, so that every Muslim must come here to Saudi Arabia on jihad, on their pilgrimage, and bring more currency into Saudi Arabia in the desert. And then what? Then when Allah comes back, he will take us to heaven. Then what? Then those who died for Allah, doing some serious things, Allah will bless them and give them a higher place in the kingdom. And those that died, some of them would receive wives and receive so in heaven there will be sex in heaven, there will be marriage in heaven, and women still in heaven would remain as gifts of Allah to mankind. That's the religion. Whether it is right or it is wrong, it's none for me to judge. But that's how ideologies are given to people to conquer their minds. And once their minds are conquered, their behavior is conquered. And once their behavior is conquered, they have no will of their own except to submit their will to the system of the explorers and the missionaries. And once they are under the blanket of the missionaries and the explorers, they cannot trade and they cannot manage, because mercenaries are there to manage the system for them. People are drunk with religion, obsessed with deities, confused about the state of the living. Churches are busy selling the state of the dead rather than teaching people the state of living. We need to live before we die. We need land. We need water. We need food. We need respect. We need dignity while we are alive. We don't have to wait to die to receive these blessings, to receive these human rights. So I thought I'd come up here today and share with you those 4 criminals that came to Africa. Criminal number 1, their traders and their businesses. Criminal number 2, their adventurers, their explorers, and their education. Criminal number 3, their missionaries with their rosaries, their churches, their nuns and their priests, their pastors and their prophets. What was their agenda? And ultimately, the agenda of the mercenaries and their guns, their jails, their prisons, their police, their army. That's how colonization comes into Africa. I leave it up to you, the educated friends who are working in the trade business and the merchant business. What are you going to do to transform the marketplace and make sure that it favors the African? What are you going to do with the institutions of business? And what are you going to do with the policies of business that constantly sideline the Africans in terms of participating meaningfully in the economy of the country? I want to throw it again to all my explorers and researchers and all my expedition friends who work in the educational space. What are you going to do to transform the colonial narrative? What are you going to do to rewrite the psychology, the sociology, the anthropology of the African, so that the African can be educated correctly as an African, as a human being, and as a title deed holder to the land on which he is living? I throw it again to you, my pastors, my bishops, my reverends, my priests, my papas. What are you going to do with this Jesus? What are you going to do with this Jesus? What are you going to do with these lies we have been telling people for all these years? What are you going to do? Don't worry about your stomach and your money. What are you going to do to reintroduce truth rather than introducing a wrong character but get the right money? What are you going to do to transform the religious dogma and the lies of theology we've been feeding people for the past 400 years? Some of you, I don't blame you. I don't blame you at all. You know nothing more than what you are doing. You know nothing more than you were taught. You can't do anything except what the teachers and the missionaries and the seminaries taught you. That's all that you know. But what are you going to do to transform, to reform, to decolonize, deconstruct this religious space and make sure that it is authentically African, to deal with the African problems and bring about African solutions, using solutions found in the spiritual space, which has been contaminated by the missionaries? What are you going to do? Because we will not survive with this missionary gospel. I promise you the truth. Before I die, some pastors are going to be beaten up by church members. They're going to be stoned in churches